Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Chimps Ahoy and Ghost Host. So, an episode I really like, and one that I like but not as much as its sister. Up to y'all to guess which is which. At least until I tell you in the next 10 minutes or so. Nah, but these are two season 4 episodes that aren't super talked about, so there isn't much for me to say about either of them. So let me move on and say that as always, a thank you goes out to everyone who's watching this video today, and now let's just get right into it. Starting us off today is Chimps Ahoy, which is yet another Season 4 episode with very mixed reviews. Even for myself, opinions about this episode are mixed. They've jumped up, down, left, right. I thought this episode was great, I thought it was bad, I thought it was meh. Now, though, I've settled pretty comfortably on this episode being at least pretty decent, if not good or great. The beginning of this episode makes me think of just how many episodes begin with something getting mailed to one of the houses on Conch Street. Like there's this episode, Idiot Box, Chocolate with Nuts. It's a decently common episode starter, though I guess not compared to other beginnings. Anyway, Chimps Ahoy starts off pretty well with some good jokes, like Patrick mistaking SpongeBob's arm for the back scratcher, or when SpongeBob and Patrick attempt to go to Squidward's house only for the octopus himself to yell from inside, stopping them in their tracks. I think that joke was helped immensely by SpongeBob and Patrick not missing a beat in their decision to go to Sandy's house instead. And once the two get to the tree dome, we see some wonderful dramatics with Sandy freaking out over her boss is coming. And I also love how expressive the animation is here. Chimps Ahoy is yet another great example of adult woes being tackled in a kid-friendly manner. I mean, the gist of the plot is that Sandy is freaking out because if she doesn't pass the inspection by her benefactors, her funding will be cut. Sandy assumedly uses her funding for housing in Bikini Bottom, along with other things like food and such, and that implies the existence of taxes and or mortgages, and now, I'm wondering, with Sandy's bosses being from the surface, do they use the same currency? Is there an exchange rate? Yeah, I'm overthinking again. As someone who's been doing scientific research on a college campus, this feels like the exact kind of niche woe I can relate to, although I don't get funded the way Sandy does. Still, especially now, I can relate to this more than I did when I wrote this review in February of last year. All of this is besides the point. Maybe it's time for me to go back to the point. Sandy's inventions in this segment are pretty cool and very creative, and I love SpongeBob and Patrick's determination to help their friend out. I love their brainstorming session and how Patrick keeps thinking of things that already exist, because that's really how it goes sometimes. And it's also just a funny moment, especially as Patrick gets legitimately angry at having his ideas stolen from him. And the part where Mirror SpongeBob talks is hilarious as well, reminds me of Wet Painters. Chimps Ahoy takes a card from the deck of Texas with Sandy singing as she prepares to leave Bikini Bottom. It's a pretty alright, although completely forgotten song, and I love the way that Sandy is drawn here. And just like Texas, Sandy's song re-energizes SpongeBob and Patrick, and once again I adore their determination to make sure Sandy can stay in Bikini Bottom forever. The little montage of SpongeBob and Patrick creating their invention is short, and I'm considering whether I think it should have been longer. It should have only if it wasn't completely a montage and there were jokes all throughout, so it being short isn't a problem because that means things don't drag. Moving on, we finally meet Sandy's bosses. They all have pretty fun designs, even if they don't exactly fit with the typical SpongeBob SquarePants art style. I also like their names, they're so fun. SpongeBob and Patrick's interactions with the three chimps are pretty good to watch as well. I like how SpongeBob is really talking Sandy up, and Patrick's declaration that he used to be dumb. And then of course we have probably the most memorable joke of the episode, which is Mr. Dr. Professor Patrick. You'd think Patrick being such a pedant like this would be annoying, but nah, it just makes me laugh. And then all the jokes about SpongeBob being an unpaid intern, honestly so relatable. I really love that the invention SpongeBob and Patrick end up creating is a callback to the very beginning of the episode, and once again, we love cohesive writing. I do wish the machine had a slightly better design though. It looks kinda bad, and not in the purposeful way it's meant to look poorly constructed, but that's okay. The design of the machine is not an important element of this episode, and it's not an important element of my opinion. The scene of the invention being tested is entertaining, especially once things start going wrong. I love how Lord Reginald talks back at the machine, and then Patrick saying that the screaming means it's working is pretty funny. Finally, Sandy re-enters the episode, and I love all the little snide comments that the chimps have as they start leaving, especially the one about the economic benefits of underwater tree domes. I also love how Patrick tries to pull his Mr. Dr. Professor Patrick shit, and Sandy has absolutely none of that. And then we once again get another good callback, though this time it's a real Chekhov's gun, with Sandy's nutcracker being used as a banana peeler, appealing to the chimps' senses, and landing her a 20-year contract of even more money. This isn't how research works in real life at all, but go Sandy anyway. Honestly, these chimps are full of some great witty comments. Like, I love when Lord Reginald is like, Sandy should put her talents towards making an automatic poop throwing machine. Like, that's such a clever joke. And then the episode ends on, well, not quite a stinger, but a funny note when with Patrick going into the dangerous machine like it's a ride, leaving us all with a good idea for what is to come for him. I think Chimps Ahoy is a rather underrated episode, or at least it is for the people who rate it lowly. Again, this is an episode that has garnered some very mixed reviews, which is something I could tell when looking at the discussion post for this episode on the forum, but I quite like this one. It's not super top of the line funny, but it's still pretty funny with some clever jokes and great callbacks sprinkled in. It's also a well-written episode, and all of the characters here bounce off of each other really well. My first thought when seeing that there were 3 chimps was that was too many, and even though each chimp doesn't quite have a personality on their own, I think this episode does a good job at not making any of the chimps feel redundant. This episode even has got some wholesome elements to it, with SpongeBob and Patrick working hard to keep Sandy Bikini Bottom, not to mention Sandy easily being able to tell that SpongeBob and Patrick were doing exactly that. Altogether, I'd say that this episode fits right into my great tier, where it comes in with a score of 8 out of 10. Ghost Host is a massively underrated episode in my humble opinion. Actually, scratch that. I ain't humble. I'm right. This episode is just a great time, and I barely see anyone ever talk about it other than that one scene with SpongeBob throwing out all the partygoers. Even then, I bet a lot of the people who use any variation of that meme don't even know the episode it originated from. Anyway, Ghost Host is also a really nostalgic episode for me, although there's not really any reason for it. Maybe it's because I've always liked this episode, so I'd watch it more than other ones, which means I developed all those sweet and good childhood memories with it, but that's just my theory. But no matter what caused the nostalgia, it doesn't matter, because nostalgia doesn't drive my reviews, it informs them. And right now, it's informing me that I'm reviewing an episode that I enjoy quite a lot, so let's talk about it. First thing I gotta say is that Ghost Host is a Flying Dutchman episode, which means I'm already excited because I love the Flying Dutchman and I've been missing him a lot since he hasn't appeared since Born Again Crabs. So that's already some big points in this episode's favor. And secondly, this episode has a plot that has got some similarity to Can You Spare a Dime, which, as you may recall, is my second favorite episode of all time. So that's now a whole other boatload of points in this episode's favor. I mean, not really, since I don't actually like episodes more because of associations like this, but it's like, it primes me to like this episode more. One thing I really like about Ghost Host is that it's chock full of great character interactions and dynamics, especially between the Flying Dutchman and SpongeBob. So just a minute ago, I was talking about how this episode shares some similarities with Can You Spare a Dime, and one of the big similarities is the way SpongeBob's character is handled. See, one of the things I absolutely adored in that episode, you might remember, is when SpongeBob finally gets fed the fuck up at Squidward and Mr. Krabs. And so guess what SpongeBob does in this episode after the Flying Dutchman starts trashing his home? Yep, that same kind of dramatic rage present in Can You Spare a Dime and Rockabye Bye Valve is present in this episode too, with SpongeBob completely snapping when he comes home to find the Dutchman and his friends trashing his house. His shouting at everyone is amazing, as per usual, Tom Kenny went off here. And then I love SpongeBob's determination to get the Dutchman back on his feet. It's almost like he learned from what happened with Squidward in Can You Spare a Dime. Instead of passively waiting for the Dutchman to return to form, he actively helps him. I mean, it still took him a few months to do this, but hey, at least it wasn't so much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one. So I'd say that this is an improvement. Also, I love how Squidward is brought into this episode only to have the bejesus scared out of him. I think it's hilarious that SpongeBob told the Dutchman he should go after Squidward. I'm telling you, I think that Ghost Host might be a stealth sequel or a spiritual successor to Can You Spare a Dime. Why else would SpongeBob act like he has a vendetta against Squidward? Well, actually, I could think of a couple more explanations, but this one is the funniest to me. It's Troll Bob. Anyway, SpongeBob also has some other really great character moments in this episode, like, I love when the Dutchman first shows up, SpongeBob gets super protective over Gary. Y'all know I love some Gary and SpongeBob, so of course I'm pointing this out. And then I love seeing SpongeBob slowly get utterly bored of the Dutchman's scare tactics, especially when he's literally like, "Are you done?" It almost feels like character growth considering how easily scared SpongeBob was shown to be throughout the series. And then the next thing I really like about this episode is that it's funny. First off, it's innately hilarious to me that the Dutchman crashes at SpongeBob's place. I don't know why, but the idea is just humorous to me. And then we've got lots of great gags in there as well, such as when the Dutchman first shows up and SpongeBob goes over to Squidward's place for help, and he ends up knocking the dude's head in. Squidward's ensuing line is said with such masterful vitriol that I have to question if Roger Bumpus is talking from experience. And then I also love how Patrick shows up for literally 1 second just to leave SpongeBob to the wolves. Like, that was funny. The whole power within thing was hilarious as well. And then I love when the Dutchman and his friends are trashing up SpongeBob's place, and the Dutchman is talking to Nancy, and she's like, "Is that a wedding ring?" Like, for whatever reason, that was really funny to me. Perhaps because of how random it was, and also kind of because of the implications of this scene. And then, of course, there's the ending of the episode where it's revealed that the Dutchman's ship has been fixed for a long time now. He leaves SpongeBob with a gift when he departs, a gift that has a monster inside. And I love how after SpongeBob gets eaten by said monster, he's all like, "Good old Dutchie." Even rooming with a ghost for months can't get rid of this little guy's endless joy. And this is consistent with SpongeBob's desensitization throughout this episode, so I like that too. And the last thing I wanted to point out is that Ghost Host is full of some great visuals and expressions. Like, every time the Dutchman scares, or fails to scare, someone, the designs and animation are super amazing and impressive. I really adored the scene of the Dutchman scaring Squidward. It was funny and just a wee bit disturbing, and visually quite great. And like, just about every face in this episode is gold, especially the ones made by SpongeBob. I just really like Ghost Host, clearly. Now for the part where I have to make my ensuing score make sense after all the positivity. So the reason why this episode is not going to get a really high score is because it isn't that funny. Like, yes, I did talk about all these great jokes, and indeed, they are there. But, I don't know. I'm not good at talking about episodes that are funny but not super funny without making it sound like I think they're the funniest things on the planet. And anyway, the Dutchman going out and failing to scare people was kind of a low point of the episode. Not bad or even meh by any means, but not as good as the rest, so that kind of brought things down. Honestly, I enjoy this episode more for its plot than its comedy, which isn't terribly common for me. So all of this is why I'm putting Ghost Host in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9 out of 10. As always, gotta end this review with some closing thoughts of mine. I don't really have all that many. Thinking back to Chimps Ahoy, I gotta be honest and say something very random, but I literally could never remember the chimps' names. I won't say that they're memorable characters, but I feel like they're more memorable for their designs than anything else. And I also did say how, like, they didn't feel redundant, but also none of them really stood apart from each other. I just think it worked better for there to be 3 chimps instead of just 1, though. I feel like 2 would have been a weird balance too, so 3 is fine. Just perhaps the execution was not the best it could have been. And then, thinking of Ghost Host, for some reason the first thing that pops to mind for me here is that this episode is like a guilty pleasure episode for me. Not that I have anything to feel guilty about. I think I more mean that this episode is not talked about in a way that is proportional to how much I love it, so it feels weird. And like, it's not like it's disliked, so it feels even weirder than when I like episodes that are not normally liked, or that are normally disliked. But whatever. I don't actually care. It's just something I've thought about. I also feel like Ghost Host is kind of the spiritual antithesis to Shanghai. I mean, Dutchman staying with SpongeBob instead of the other way around, the Dutchman having trouble with scaring where SpongeBob does not instead of vice versa. I guess the things that don't change are Patrick being unhelpful and Squidward going through it, though Patrick was at least helpful in the perfume department scene. Okay, but yeah, that's all y'all are getting out of me today, so let me end the review here, and I'll see you guys in the next review.